Friends, sorry, I'm back. I know it's been a while. Actually, I think it's been a little over 2 weeks. I took a break. I checked out a little because I was finding myself feeling a little under the weather, at least feeling fatigued. And I'm sure you're all feeling a little bit of that right now. Realizing this sort of nightmare isn't going to really go away. And then all this survival energy is now coming to a crash landing. I sort of felt like I hit that wall about 2 weeks ago. A lot of things came to head for me. It was just trying to swallow a lot of reality pills. Hearing of my colleagues who are committing suicide after they're fighting the long hours in the trenches, as well as the economy on unstable, and just the world continually to stay in a split mode. That was a little overwhelming, and I realized that fatigue sort of reminded me of a place I had been before. I've mentioned in the past that I found functional medicine back 7 years ago when I started experiencing a couple of things, and part of it was burnout. And I sort of felt like this fatigue felt like that when I was in the mode of burnout. So let's talk about what burnout really is. Burnout, at least defined for physicians, is a time when time when physicians are overwhelmed, fatigued, cynical and negative, hopeless, and just burnt out. And that comes from a certain situation of exhaustion and purely from stress. And it's a different type of stress. It's a chronic stress. And it's a chronic stress that you can't control. So when you're sitting in broken systems and work that's difficult and long hours of work, that adds up to burnout. And so when I went through burnout, I studied a lot about it because, in the burnout world, the treatment for burnout is basically, get it together, be grateful for what you have, and maybe see some counselors and maybe take an antidepressant. And that wasn't enough for me when I was experiencing burnout. So I looked into it, and so when I looked into it, now with the functional medicine lens, burnout is actually part of what we're going to start figuring that or feeling when we are feeling fatigued during this quarantine and this crisis, because we are currently in a chronic stress that we can't control. And really it's a higher level of stress because it has to do with fear, it has to do with afraid of dying, it has to do with afraid of losing everything, and as the economy starts to get more and more unstable, it has to be all these things together that's changed and challenged us. And we probably did okay for the first month, but now we're going into over 2 months with this, and now we're going to start pushing this other level of chronic stress that's going to push burnout. And so I'm going to describe what fatigue is. I know fatigue is a very common complaint in primary care. And when people would come to me with fatigue, I would think, well, it's probably anemia, it's your thyroid, maybe you're depressed, are you sleeping enough? Those are all the things that we think, or stress. And those are all contributing to fatigue, but there was never really a consolidated idea of what fatigue is. So I'm going to give that to you today. So first of all, I think of fatigue, easily described, as low energy. So it's like a battery. So you all understand this. When you're walking along and all of a sudden you're looking down at your cell phone and it looks like this, and then you probably have about 15% of your battery left, and now you're starting to figure out how you're going to plug in your phone and where you're going to plug it. Did you leave your charger somewhere? That's what fatigue is. It's a low battery. And sometimes it's just general acute fatigue. You're low on, plug in, and you feel energy again. But when you talk about this chronic stress, you plug in and you don't recharge. And that's what makes this different. And so there's 3 types of energy. And those 3 types of energy I describe as physical energy, which has to do with our body. So it's everything like your muscle strength, your heart pumping. It's a type of energy that makes our body run. The second one is psychologic energy. This is mind. This is the type of energy that you need to get through a long day studying and or getting ready for your exam and your tests. But it's also the energy that keeps you emotionally stable. It's the energy that gets you through stress. It's the energy that doesn't make you lose it. You can sort of keep a balanced mind and a balanced emotion. And then the last type of energy is what I'll call purpose or drive. Um, it's a spiritual, I think in the literature they call it spiritual energy. And this spiritual, it doesn't necessarily mean a religious aspect, but some people think get energy from that. But really, this is a little bit what I actually call mojo. It is that energy that gives us purpose and drive. And so when they were describing what burnout meant, at least in the physician's world, but it's professional worlds altogether, they'd say physicians are fatigued, and that's this physical energy. Physicians are cynical and negative, and that's the psychological energy that's just plummeted. And physicians are hopeless or feeling helpless in the systems that they're in, and that's just losing your drive and your purpose. And so these all basically define what burnout is and a different type of fatigue. And this is what I was concerned that I was feeling. I started feeling that type of fatigue. So how do we get energy in our body? You know, we think of it as energy, but how do we actually quantify energy in our body? There is something in our body called the mitochondria. It's a long word, and it's very simply the powerhouse of our cells. It basically gives us energy, and it gives us energy in the form of ATP. And we need those ATPs for our body to move, our muscles to pick things up, our heart to pump. That takes ATP. We need ATP for our mind so that our brains can function. We need ATP to get through stress. We need ATP to balance our emotions so that we don't, become irritable with life. It takes a lot of ATP to have a balanced mind, and we need ATP to drive, to feel like you have energy for a purpose and for a goal. One other part I failed to mention, at least with these three, actually it takes a lot of physical energy, a lot of psychological energy to really give you that drive. And so you really can't have that purpose without a balance of good physical energy and good psychological energy. So those things are really, really important for that type of energy. So those are the types of things that describe what burnout is, and I wanted to bring that to your attention because I feel like we're all going to get there, or at least we might feel like we're treading on those waters. But the last thing I want to say about this type of energy and needing a lot of mitochondria, a really important part of mitochondria is we need that energy to heal. And so when I have patients coming to me who are doing everything perfect, they have a perfect diet, they've seen counselors, they're exercising, there's no reason why they should be feeling the illnesses or the imbalances that they're feeling. When they come to me with that, the missing piece that I always look at is battery. When you're doing everything right and you still don't feel like you feel any better, it's because you don't have a very good battery, because you haven't been able to heal and get over that imbalance that your body's feeling to heal. And it's important to bring that up in this crisis when we're talking about physical illness, at least from infection. We're going to probably hear a lot more about the drama of this healing process. If you have a complex journey with COVID and you're in the hospital and you've one of those severe COVID infections, those people now are having trouble healing. They're a month or two out, they're still having fevers, they're not able to walk, they don't have energy, and that's because they've burnt out the battery fighting off an infection, because you need it to heal. So mitochondria come up in so many ways, and I use that as a wonderful tool to get people back on track. But I wanted to bring it to light, at least with these two things: psychologic fatigue and having a purpose and a drive. Mostly because it's May and it's Mental Health Month, and that's actually really important for mental health in this crisis that we're feeling. So let's move on and talk about that mental health. The first thing is I spoke about this before when I was talking about where we were with the mindset, and mindset's really important, and actually Mojo is sort of like mindset. This is part of our mindset as well. There's two parts of our brain, and it's important to start making decisions about what part of the brain we want to mostly hang out in. And when I was hanging out 2 weeks ago, I was finding myself stuck. And I was essentially stuck in the part of the brain that I really hate to be in, and that was this midbrain. this midbrain we can get stuck in easily. And this midbrain, as I mentioned, is actually good and it's important for life because it is our survival part of our brain. We need to be able to make quick decisions for survival. We need to be able to react pretty quickly in the sign of any type of stress. But the problem is that it's only supposed to be short-lived. We shouldn't be there our whole lives. And I found myself getting a little stuck in this whole midbrain trap. And the problem with that midbrain is it's very reactive, it's very emotional, but it's less thoughtful. And the other aspects of that midbrain is that when you sit in there for too long, you become less and less flexible. You get inflexible to change. You get more and more selfish. You think things only work a certain way. This is unfortunately where addictions sit, and that's actually where you start feeling more anxious, depressed, worried, fear. Here's where fear sits as well, which I was starting to feel myself fear. And I'm not one of those that likes that feeling, but I was starting to feel that. And so that's the reason why, I needed to take a break, actually. So that midbrain is not a great place to hang out in long term. And when I'm starting to scroll through social media, and I scroll through the news, the problem is it's all of this. It's drama, it's conspiracy theories, it's poor information or inadequate information or information that's not even correct. So that's sort of worrisome that we're in that boat of getting stuck in that midbrain. This part that we actually want to get into is that prefrontal cortex. That's what PFC is. That's the front part of our brain. And that front part of our brain is really, really important because that's where we think. That's where we're more rational. That's where true wisdom comes from. That's where we can actually think and learn, respond, react in a very organized way, intellectual way, and actually that's where we learn. And the important part of that is that's where true wisdom comes from, in that part of our brain. It takes that part of our brain to be flexible and adapt. And that's actually what we're going to have to do here soon. We're going to have to start being more flexible so we can adapt. Because when you talk about true survival, if that's really the term we want to talk about, it really comes from adapting to what we're in. The other good part about this brain is it actually thinks about others. And that's an important place because I feel like, as I mentioned, I feel like we're getting sort of stuck in that midbrain. And when we're thinking about others, yes, it is about wearing a mask to protect the vulnerable. But the other part about that is thinking it's also a situation where we have to think about other solutions. I can think about others and be empathetic enough to say, hey, what about my neighbors who haven't been working for 3 months? How are they paying their bills? I can be empathetic enough, what about those people who are living at home with an abuser? Or what about those people who are lonely, elderly, who are either being abused, because there's elderly abuse, or maybe, they're just lonely. And over the last couple of years, we've done plenty of studies to find that isolation actually is one of the number one killers, especially in the context of mental health disease. And it's concerning that we are set up for a lot of mental health challenges and that we're just isolated. So I feel like, where we're sitting now was a really important milestone. There was a crisis, there was, trouble, and what we did was we put our finger in the leak. We put it in the leak so we could stop bleeding out. But the problem is, wearing the mask and staying home is not the long-term answer because there's so many other things we have to think about. And so when we sit in this part of the mind, we can be rational and thoughtful and start thinking about all these other situations that are probably, that we probably can't let continue in this current situation. So that's why I was, taking some time. I needed to get out of this place. I needed to start thinking more positively in this place because I was getting a little bit angry. And I needed to find my purpose and my mojo again. I needed to start feeling driven to do something. And so this is what I'm here for today, is sort of to explain all this to you and give you a heads up that this is probably some of what you're starting to feel. It is something you can do something about. And so let me give you a couple of tips of what to do about that before we'll finish off. Now that you have how it's all set up. Well, remember I told you this is trouble. And so what I tell folks to do is you need to unplug from this and disconnect. because when we sit there and watch too much of that negativity, well, I realized this. I started opening up some of these articles on the economy and, how healthcare is about ready to crumble and how primary care and clinics are actually closing. That's a concern. And all these other things that are sort of concerning. What happens is that started coming into my feeds, and it was feeding more of that. And so, I had to put it away so it can stop. It can stop the madness. And so I unplugged from that, and I unplugged from social media, so that's why I've been gone. So yes, we need to unplug from the drama. You can't stay cycling in that path. The next thing is you need to connect. So in order to get from midbrain, because midbrain is okay as long as we don't stay there, we need to connect to our prefrontal cortex. Connection to that prefrontal cortex takes a couple of things. It takes a lot of brain health. And when I'm talking brain health, I'm talking mitochondria. It takes battery. So it takes a lot of brain battery and energy to get over to this part of our brain. The other important connections we need to start making is we need to connect with family and friends. Socially isolating and getting people in those places is a tough place to be. So you have to actively connect. And that means visually getting on FaceTime or Zoom or any of these types of technologies that are available these days, or just get on the phone old-fashioned way and just hear a voice, hear a soul behind a conversation. We need to start doing more of that. And last but not least, we need to get back into routine and rhythm. So when I was stuck about those 2 weeks, I stopped exercising. My sleep was off, and I found myself staying up a little longer than I usually would do. And so this is what this brain likes to do. This part of the brain likes to stay up to 2 or 3 in the morning. It's really, really important because this part of our brain loves routine. This part of our brain likes a little bit of discipline. This part of the brain loves Mother Nature, so it follows the sun and it follows the moon. So really having this rhythm, what's called a circadian rhythm, is really important. So we need to go to bed at least by 9 or 10 p.m. and wake up when the sun rises. We need to get out in the sun and let the sun hit our skin. We need to let the sun hit our eyes. We need to get back with Mother Nature. I guess I should have said we need to connect to Mother Nature as well. But Mother Nature is part of this rhythm that we need to connect, and that's what this part of the brain actually really likes. And discipline, so you get off track with things, and so I literally had to sit there and look at my schedule and start putting down things because I was missing out on things. I said, this day I need to exercise, this day I need to start my job, this day I need to do this day, and just literally get myself back on track and put it on paper. And when important things to put on your routine, or at least in your schedule, you need to sleep, and that needs to follow a good rhythm, and you need to start exercising. You don't have to get crazy about it because you don't have your gym to go to. You just need to get out, go for a bike ride, go for a walk, do some crazy jumping jacks on your lawn. Remember those old school things? Do all of those things. And then last but not least, food. We need to get back on track to realize, what you put in your body is what you are. So if I said that you have battery issues, guess what we do? How do we fill that battery? The first thing we do is we get energy from our food to make this ATP. And so if you're picking up fast food, there's not a lot of battery in that. So we got to start changing the way we're eating so that we can give ourselves a boost with our energy. And so all of those things are simple things that, don't really cost a lot. They really just cost, time and attention for us to get back on track. And quite honestly, friends, part of my quiet internalizing moments was just realizing we're really in a tough spot. And it really is going to take a lot of us together sitting in this part of our brain more. Instead of harassing each other about things that we're doing and not doing right, we need to actually start thinking about better answers of how we're going to save ourselves, not only from a health standpoint, from an economy standpoint, and just in general survive. I have a lot of ideas. I actually have a lot of programs for mitochondria, some great stuff I do for mitochondria. I ended up having to recharge my own back in the day. And so hit me up if you feel like you really do need a little bit more help. It is May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'm here. I actually take care of a lot of patients with anxiety and depression. I feel that this is a tough time for you as well. And definitely let me know if you need any answers or any direction of how to help you out. But I'm back, so hopefully I'll put some more stuff up so you guys can have a lot to learn, because in the 2 weeks that I was off, so much has come up about this coronavirus and things that add to this equation. So thanks so much for your time and your attention.